Very special welcome to Angela Campagnoni of Atlantic Fashion Week. I want to thank you so much for joining us today on the East Coast Fashion Summit. We are thrilled to have you here, and we really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today.
Awesome. No, thank you for inviting me. I'm excited.
So let's start because I know a little bit about your journey, but let's let everyone else viewing today find out a little bit more about you and how you got your start in the fashion world and how you came to start AFW.
Sure. I guess the Coles Note version, because it could go back a long ways, about 32 years ago, my parents decided to enroll me in with a modeling agency. I was 14 and very tall and awkward, and they thought it might give me a bit of confidence and, learn to carry yourself. And which is kind of funny because, modeling in the 80s was not a place to go if you were looking for confidence. It was pretty cutthroat in the 80s, but I definitely learned quickly to have sort of that thick skin and kind of being put into some somewhat adult situations probably a little faster than I should have been. Even just the chaos of backstage and changing, and there's guys and there's girls, and it's a little bit crazy. But I guess being in that industry, it really exposed me to a lot of different areas. So I got to experience backstage, I got to experience production, just working with designers. So there was just so much that it actually opened me up to. It really wasn't modeling that really became the thing that I loved. I did eventually, buy a modeling agency, and I eventually, became a modeling agent, but it wasn't about me being on the runway. It was about, sort of supporting and sort of launching other people. After school, after high school, I went into design. So I became a fashion designer, and I worked in that industry for about 11 years. And a lot of factory life, which was fantastic. I would tell anybody launching their career not to go right from school into launching their own brand. I say if you can get experience working with people and under people, that really opened my eyes to the possibilities of all the things that are out there in the industry. I left there about 2006, the world of design. It was through that I realized how much I loved the branding, I loved the marketing, I loved the selling of what it was we were doing. And at this point, I had already owned the modeling agency. I had actually, thing that tends to surprise people, I left design completely and went into the world of Xerox. I wanted to get a sales background. I didn't want to go back to school because I was in my early 30s at the time. And they have this enormous, very well-respected training program. And I was a top sales rep, absolutely loved it. But, I went from design to tech, which was, completely a different industry. And, I would encourage anybody not to ever feel boxed in. Like, you can take your experiences and, you can adapt it. But it was never my goal to stay there. It was my goal to get all of the experience that I could, that I would then use with the modeling agency at the time I was running sort of as a side business, and to get back into more of the branding and the selling. So once that happened, I decided, okay, I had all this experience, I had the models, what was I going to do with all this? And I remember when I was a new student, new designer starting out, it was really hard to get any publicity. And mind you, that was also in the 90s. There wasn't social media. There wasn't, all of these types of tools. It was like literally radio and newspaper ads. Like that's how you got your name out there. And nothing like dating myself, but it's just how it was. And I wanted to do something that could help.
Yeah.
And I know when I started, the finances to try to put on a full-scale production was just not, in the realm of most people's possibilities. So I just came up with the idea to start Atlantic Fashion Week. And it's kind of funny. I remember in the beginning, I had a few designers that were established at that time. This is back 2007. a few designers that, were a little upset that I hadn't invited them to be part of it. And I was like, well, I haven't invited any designers. I'm not sure how many designers there are when I'm starting Fashion Week. I want to get the sponsors first.
Yeah.
So I kind of did it a little backwards than what a lot of people will do, but it worked for me because I didn't want to be that person to get this great idea, because I get a lot of great ideas, but then not be able to make it happen.
Right.
So I had my wish list of sponsors, which was, Redken Canada, and at the time it was through Bell Media, who are both, now it's Virgin Radio and still Redken Canada. They came on board in the very beginning, and they've stayed with us ever since. And there's been a lot of other sponsors that have come and gone, and it's been really good. So once I had that ability to say, okay, I have sponsors, I can actually put this thing on. Then I approached designers. I'm like, oh, I better see how many there actually are in 2007, and do we have much of an industry? But it was awesome. We had a fantastic kickoff event. I had one night that had very, very low attendance, and I was like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? I have all this, expenses put into this massive event. But then the other 2 nights were sold out. It was like crazy packed. I think I had 400 people one night. It was just, the pictures are awesome. So it was a roller coaster. It was, it was a gamble. It was a roller coaster. In the beginning, I did try to do 2 in 1 year. And I quickly realized we didn't have the infrastructure. We weren't ready for that. So I moved it to once a year. We generally do it in the fall, with the goal that maybe we'd do something in the spring, or people would do their own shows in the spring and I could help promote them, like that type of thing. But we just kept it at that. For us, it works once a year to have, a big scale production, and we just kind of go with the flow, and it changes a little bit each year. We kind of still have some of the same sort of structure, but we have to adapt. It's the only way you survive. And that's kind of where I've been. It's taken me, well, this would have been our 14th season, unfortunately, that, with COVID, things have changed, but, number 14 can come back next fall, and we'll just keep trucking along. But yeah, it's sort of it just became such a part of me that I don't really know what life would look like without being somewhat involved in fashion at some level. So yeah, that was a long drawn out Cole's Note version. Imagine if it wasn't the Cole's Note version.
Oh, that's fantastic. I know that's how we met, through AFW, and I have benefited from AFW myself, and I'm very grateful to you, because in my humble opinion, I feel like you single-handedly put our little city of Halifax on the map for fashion. And I always and will always appreciate you for that.
Thank
And
you. Nice to hear.
I want to say thank you for bringing AFW to us, because without it, I wouldn't be here either. So thank you, Angela.
Oh, thanks. It's always really nice to hear, because there's ups and downs with doing anything like this. There's so many personalities, and there's just, everybody, feels so passionate about what they're doing and their brand and their lines. And when you are working with an event that, on average, we try to showcase between 20 and 25 creatives. And then, you have all the other parts of it, the models, the hair and makeup and photography, lighting. I mean, it's a lot. And sometimes, there's days that it's like, oh, do I keep doing this? But then it always seems like when I have any little doubts, it's like I always talk about fate and how things are supposed to be. I get a little note from somebody,
Right.
or, I'll have somebody say something like, I just really want, it really meant a lot to me. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's kind of why I do it. I'll keep going. So it's nice to hear.
I know the reason you do it is because you really care about our city, and giving us that platform to actually be able to showcase all the talent we do have here, because we have a ton of talent here.
We
So,
do. Yeah.
bravo to you. So, I know you touched on it a bit. The COVID situation has impacted us all greatly, but I'm just wondering, how has it impacted you and AFW, and how do you see it becoming, is this the norm we're going to be living in moving forward, or do you think that COVID might eventually go away and we can get back to runways and touching each other and hugging?
I know, because we're a really huggy industry, we really are. It's been an interesting number of months. It's been a really long March break. I am glad that the kids have gone back to school. Um, as an industry, I mean, to watch the global impact to the fashion industry, it's been it's been heartbreaking and eye-opening, and all the little moving bits that people may not have thought of before. All these large big name brands not paying their factories that are overseas. They're canceling factories and not honoring, what they've had done. I mean, those will shutter those businesses. And as we move forward and try to pick it back up again, that's a skill. It's skilled workers that, that will be lost to this and already in hardship areas. um, for us, yes, we had to postpone our event. It's the first time in 14 years. It's it's disappointing, but I had looked at different things. Like, I love that you're doing this. I love that you're doing this summit, because for me, I thought about, is it something we could do in the sense of putting on virtual fashion shows? And that's a lot to put on the designers right now, because I feel like when we do AFW, it's the environment, it's having people in person, it's the music, it's the touching, it's the feeling. People get excited about it. And with us looking at doing it online, it's kind of like people may only tune in for the odd couple designers they want to see. Whereas what the big benefit for AFW is, you may go because there's 2 designers you want to see, but you're going to get exposed to maybe 6 to 8 more, and all of a sudden fall in love with somebody that you've never heard of. And I feel like that would have been lost a little bit. And I don't want the designers putting so much money into their stock and their samples and their everything, and not be able to somehow recoup it or be able to really use it virtually. I think if you're going to do a virtual runway show, do it on your own platforms, have each designer, and then we would share them, something like that. But I think postponing it to next fall is, it has to be for us, because we have to have certain numbers. We can't social distance. We have to find venues that, it's already hard enough finding those venues that can fit the number of people we need to have to make it work, because we don't want designers having to try to do, what you see in some of the bigger metropolises, paying $4,000 or $5,000 for their 20-minute time slot. If we were to look at something like that, where we had a show at the top of every hour, you're not going to have as many people in the seats. We just don't feel that it's going to be a benefit on that end for them. And we are able to keep our costs down for the designers by having ticket sales. It's just, so it's a calculation. We have to have a certain number. We usually have anywhere between 60 and 80 models backstage. We have a huge hair and makeup crew. There's just no way to social distance.
No.
So it just, to keep everybody healthy and safe and not put that burden of expense, it was just something we decided had to be done. Will it change? Oh my gosh, I really hope by next fall they've got something in place, whether it's a vaccine, whether, we've gotten over the curve, or, we've just, I mean, we're doing very, very well. Obviously, Nova Scotia is doing very well. But I think we're doing well because we've been so, tight on our restrictions. And I guess it's going to be a touch and go. We'll know by, next summer if something happens and we have to just look at something else, which I'm not really sure what that would be. But I guess we'll just keep our fingers crossed.
We're all doing that. We're all just a wait and see game, and just once we get to that point, then we'll make the decisions then. Yeah. Well, so I know you're always doing a lot, and even just your story, you've been in so many different positions. So where does all of this drive come from? Like, what motivates you to make these passions real?
I've always, I guess, it's hard talking about yourself. And because I've always had a give back sort of attitude. I'm very passionate about trying to help people and give back. And it's a bit of a drive that way. It's a little bit of craziness as well, because, you just keep going. And when I say to my husband, you know what, I think I'm going to do this. So I think I'm going to add, what if we did this? And he eventually gets that glossed over look on his face, like, I don't know why you're asking. You're just going to do it anyway. So, which is, it's kind of how it is.
Yeah.
I think you have to have that. I think it's a bit of an artistic approach too, like, just push through and move on. And I was actually having this conversation with somebody recently about there's been a lot of things through both personal and my career that I've always just kind of pushed through it. And sometimes that's good and healthy, and sometimes it's not, but it's just always been my personality. And I think because of that personality, AFW made it through a few years that would have been maybe a breaking point for some. A lot of events don't make it past 5-year mark. It's hard to keep it going, but I think out of just sheer um, just stubbornness that we got over some hurdles and figured out a way to do it. But I think you just have to kind of believe in what you're doing and just trust your gut. There'll be a time when I think this isn't the right platform, and then I'd have to transition it into something else, and I'll only do it basically if I really feel it's helping.
Right.
It's no point just doing it and not having it. It's funny, I was watching a podcast, or sorry, a live video, and it had nothing to do with us or AFW, but there was an interview going on. I was watching it, and somebody had mentioned, goes, oh, they think they'd seen me sign in to watch it, and they're like, oh, Angela, she's got one of the oldest fashion weeks in Canada, and they were talking, and I was just like, oh, okay. That's great. Because it was in central, it was in place in central Ontario, and it was, so it was kind of nice because they know what's going on. And I've never really thought about it, but yeah, there's a lot of fashion weeks that have come and gone, and we've
And you're
we've
here.
lasted. We've lasted because we have the ability. I feel that my ability to really look at something that's not working, change it up a bit, tweak it. We've never followed the fashion calendar. Like when we have designers showing in October, it's not showing spring of next year. It's see now, buy now. We've always been that. It seems to be the trend the last couple of years in the bigger cities. Oh, we're having a see now, buy now. I'm like, I've been doing it for 10 years. It's the way it works. Designers show what they have, they take their orders, and that has a bit to do with the fact that a lot of it's custom work, one-of-a-kind pieces. There's a few designers that are obviously showcasing, what's coming up, like Twig and Feather. She obviously sells based on seasons, and usually when she's showcasing her line, it's the stuff she's about to launch. So there is some of that once you get established. But even globally, the fashion calendar, one thing you're really seeing from all of this is changing.
Yeah.
It doesn't work for consumers anymore to go into a store in February seeing summer clothes being put up, and all of a sudden in February all the designer clothes are being put on sale. And what some people don't realize is a lot of times when those things go on sale, it hurts the original designer, because there's usually stipulations in place in the contracts that if we have to mark this stuff down to move it, they're going to take a hit. And that doesn't work. Like, I don't want to go in and see summer dresses if I'm looking to buy a sweater, because then I'm thinking, well, do I really want to buy this sweater? Yeah, what, summer is almost coming up, and maybe I should just hold off and I'll get a few pieces for the spring. Like, so it's not working well, I don't think, the way it has been. So I think you're seeing a shift in that things are starting to get shifted on how they're delivered, so they have the opportunity to sell things at full rate. So
Yeah, and it'll be more sustainable, and it'll make more sense for people to be in the moment buying instead of planning to buy in the future when we don't even know what's going to happen in our future. So
yeah,
a little
that's true.
bit has aligned that.
Yeah, it's just going to be an interesting next couple of years. I really see so much change, even the whole push to buy Canadian, and seeing what happened when there's the PPE shortage, and the fact that really made people realize where their products were coming from. And I think seeing how the industry as a whole jumped in to help, whether it was making masks, whether like you look at Stanfield's, they have shipped over 2 million PPE gowns. This is a company that's been an underwear and base layer company for 150 years. They were able to flip their manufacturing. All the supplies that were put into making the PPE were from local as well. So the fact that the community could pull together and on such a massive scale, 2 million garments, like it's crazy. And I just hope that once we get out of this, people really remember that. They remember to support those Canadian companies.
Fell apart. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. So you've been in fashion for a long time. So how would someone with your extensive knowledge in every area of fashion define fashion?
Ooh, that's a big question because I think it's a personal question. I think everybody sees fashion differently. Some see it as an art. Some see it as their personal definition of style, and this is who I am, and they express it through how they dress and how they wear it. And other people see fashion as just something they have to do. I have to put clothes on in the morning or I get arrested. Like, so people, it's funny because those people who tend to just think of it that way, they still have a style, they just don't realize it. They're like maybe they like jeans and t-shirts and they don't want to dress up. But it's casual and that's your thing. And you're kind of self-identifying, with what you're putting on without even trying. But yeah, it's just in so much. I mean, for me, fashion is it's not only been just my career, it's just been something that is part of me. Like, I just can't imagine not having some sort of role within the industry, even when I'm, retired on having a drink on a beach somewhere. I still feel like I'll be sitting there making sure something's going on. It's
Still be very fashionable, I guarantee it.
yes, the big hat and the glasses, and yeah. Yeah.
What's your favorite part of the fashion industry, Angela?
I get really excited. Well, there's a couple really fun parts. I get very excited when the designers do their end walk and there's either family or friends and the crowd is cheering for them. I love that beam that you see on their face. I love that really means something to me. And I really love seeing when designers have a win. So, when I see that they've landed some job or somebody's wearing their stuff, or they've received some kind of award, or maybe a piece in one of the publications that's following them and doing something. I love that. I love seeing people getting ahead. There's one thing that's so different I find about the community in the Maritimes is that we support each other.
Mhm.
Everybody wants to be the best.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a little bit, I think, there's a little bit of that, nature in people. But we truly will support each other when, they need help, or when, they just need to talk to each other about getting ideas. Whereas you don't see that as much in some of the larger centers. There is such an abundance available. People have to realize that there's enough for everyone. I know that the Canadian fashion industry is trying so hard to really, put themselves on the map in general. All of Canada is trying to do that in fashion. And, we've made huge strides in the last 10 years, I would say, for that. But, we still a long ways to go. And, but there is so much out there that you don't have to feel like keeping all your cards close to you. I don't want to share my information. I don't want to share this. I don't want to share that. I have never really understood that mentality.
Right. Scarcity.
You know,
Yeah,
yeah,
really, there's an abundance. So we
yeah.
definitely need to have that. You're very right.
No, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Unless you're making that $1 billion doing what you're doing, and you don't want to share it, which is a little greedy, but there's little pieces of that pie. There's always going to be something out there. You just really have to focus on what you're doing, not worry about what everybody else is doing. Stay true to your vision, your goal, and just be open to talking and sharing and listening to ideas. Maybe somebody else has an idea for you. Not, it's not necessarily a critique. They just want to give an idea, and there's lots of nuggets out there.
Yeah, you're providing a lot of nuggets right now. I hope people are listening because this is great advice. I really appreciate it. And I think it's so sweet that, and I never realized that, but about the designers coming out and that beam that you were talking about. I think that's so cool. I didn't even think of that before.
I think it's like the mom in me. I think it's like I'm like, oh, look at all my little designer children, even though they're not. And some of them are my age, but that's fine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Say is your greatest source of inspiration? Like What lights you up?
Wow, that's a great question. Um, I love coming up with new ideas, and they just come to me from everywhere and anywhere. I get very excited when I have an idea that I think will help renew or, to do something. Um, you know, it's it's kind of like what I do is like breathing now. So I don't really ever stop and think about, what is my inspiration to keep going. But really, I guess the things that make me happy, like, seeing the designers succeeding or, having these every now and then these little notes that come in and, from designers. I guess that's really kind of what keeps me going in that sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can see that all about you're all about that, and I know that. And that's why we love you.
Oh, thanks. You too.
What skills would you say are the most necessary for a person to have a successful fashion career?
Work ethic is a big thing. There's been such a change in the generations. And I'm not lumping, I know you always hear, oh, the millennials this, or, the boomers this, or whatever. And I don't like necessarily lumping people into a category. But there's definitely a shift in how people think. When I entered the workforce, I had a working mom, and my dad he worked as well, but he tended to be home more often because he was working on sort of like properties and different things. So he was more available, but my mom worked. So I was very driven to be like somebody who worked, and I took every little bit of education that I could. So if I could job shadow, or if I could sit in on something, or if I could do anything, I grabbed everything that I could. And I just picked away and, worked on my career and built it and built it and built it and, got to where I am. I feel now there is such a jump when people are young and want to jump into their career that they feel they should be at the top.
Right.
And it doesn't happen that way. Maybe the odd time you'll luck in, you'll get something, and you'll come up with a really great idea, and it'll take off, and that's wonderful when it happens. But it doesn't usually happen that way. And I really feel that people should try to get job experience before they necessarily, jump into a full-blown business. Even if you do the business on the side but can work under somebody, the progression, I guess, that I sort of skipped over when talking about myself was when I did graduate from school, I actually did open a business right away. And I wanted to do bridal couture, because what's better than beautiful wedding gowns? Brides are always so happy. No, they're not. And at 21, I really didn't have the skill set on the personality to deal with, necessarily the feedback and the sort of up and down nature of that industry. And actually, my shop, I know I was doing pretty good, but it kind of became a little bit more of a tailoring and dressmaking. And then I had this horrific flood in my shop, and 2 years of all my hand-drawn patterns were destroyed. And I had been doing some work for local Nova Scotia textiles. I'd been doing some side work for them to help them. They didn't have a designer on site. And then they sort of came to me in the middle of this and said, we're looking at creating this position. Would you take a look at it? Yeah, I was thinking, okay, and at that point I was probably 22, 23, and I was like, paycheck, go in, get some experience. I did, and I ended up being in factory work for probably almost 11 years. After that, I loved it. I just kept going up. The experiences I've got, working with importers, designing fabrics that were created in India, and working with the buyers, getting to, work with buyers from Sears and the Bay and Walmart and Zellers, and actually going and pitching and teaching the sales force how to sell it. Like, it just, the experiences were so amazing that I would have had I just been, working on my own. So I really feel you have to have a strong work ethic. I feel you have to be true to your word. When you ask to meet with somebody, who's willing to share advice with you, you show up, You be on time. You don't, reschedule them a bunch of times because they're, doing you a favor. You're not, doing them a favor. And honestly, try to suck up as much experience as you can.
Yeah.
Job shadow, do it for free if you have to. Just take it where you can, and that becomes invaluable.
Yeah, fantastic advice. That knowledge is irreplaceable when you're moving forward. If you do want to start your own brand, then you have this great base. Then you won't, your house won't crumble as you build.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. Now, how do you stay up to date with fashion, or do you even try?
You know what? I actually don't. It's funny. People would say, what's your style, or what's this and what's that. I'm like, I'm not a trend follower. Like I don't change my wardrobe because of the trends. I really believe in classic style. That's me personally. I'll get a couple of pieces, if faux fur vests are in, maybe I'll grab one. But I need it to match back to what I already have.
Right.
I'm a sucker for a nice suit jacket and jeans. I do like that sort of business casual look. I love the 60s pinup look. I love how those dresses and the pencil skirts, really fit if a woman's curvy. And just really like nice clean lines and a wrap dress.
Yeah.
You have to have a good wrap dress. It doesn't matter what kind of a day you're having. If you put a wrap dress on,
Cool.
you look pulled together, and it's great. Now, mind you, I've been living in yoga clothes for the last like 8 months, but it's all good.
We all have. Would you I know you've touched on a bunch of things already, but is there something else maybe that you could add to say about yourself or your background that might really surprise people?
Well, I guess some people get surprised when they found out I've written a children's book. Um, that's people will say, "Oh, you wrote a children's book. Is it about fashion?" I'm like, "No, it's actually about loss and death." And there's usually a bit of a pause there because I don't know where to go with that. But I did write a children's book a couple of years ago to help children deal with loss, and it was kind of taken from years of grief of me losing my father in my early 20s. And it's quietly been something I haven't really promoted it a lot, but it's all over the world right now. I have there must be at least 1,200 copies floating around in the UK right now, which is really bizarre to me to just think about, on the other side of the world,
Everyone's
it's helping children. I just had somebody on Instagram reach out to me, and she had made a post about the book with her daughters, and because they had lost their dad, and it was just out of the blue. It'll just come to me sometimes. I get these notifications, and it's pretty incredible. Like that, it was just like a heart project. That was something that was completely, sort of out in left field. And again, that was, one of those things that my husband was like, okay, like sure. But it was just something I did, and I never really looked back. And I really think people, they have to be open to that. You don't need to pigeonhole yourself into a spot where, I'm a designer, I can only be a designer, or, I'm a photographer, I can't do anything else. And I think creatives do have a tendency to be that way. Most people who are creative are in a lot of different mediums, but, maybe if you're somebody who's in, computer tech and you don't really think you can do anything else because that's all you've ever done, I think you have to really owe it to yourself to like explore other ways of sort of expressing yourself, and you'd be surprised.
Yeah, because we're all more than one thing. All of us are. Do you mind sharing the name of the book, Angela?
Oh yes, it's called I Want to See My Papa.
Oh, that's so sweet. Okay, I got to get that for my girls.
uh, I have some here, so next time I see you I'll give you one. Yeah. Yeah.
What do you see it coming? Maybe I know it's hard to tell right now. We're all kind of guessing, but in the next 5 to 10 years, what are some changes you expect to see in the fashion industry?
Well, there is such a recycling in style, and you're seeing little things of the 80s and the 90s, and stuff is kind of getting um, brushed off but renewed in a little bit of a twist. I think you're constantly going to see that because I don't want to say people are running out of ideas, but there is only so much you can do with a silhouette. Same with movies. They're remaking movies from the 80s, and with new cast and everything, and it's like there's got to be more stories out there that can be told. but I think you're going to see that as a continuation. But I feel the biggest change will be in how consumers get those products, the timing of products when they're, at a retail level, whether it's doing more interactions through computer and, online. And, I would hate for retail to go away,
Right.
because I really feel there's just something about, submersing yourself for an afternoon into a shop and really getting to see and try things on. There's something about that I don't think you can ever get that customer experience. But I think that you're going to see a lot more of that. You're going to see a lot more tech in fashion, whether it's how you buy your fashion or what is in the fashion. And I think you'll just see that continuance of sort of renewing styles. Soon it'll be like, was that from the 80s or was that from the 2020s? Because it's kind of the same, So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
You've done so many jobs. Is there an area of fashion that you haven't worked in yet that you always think, I should try that at some point? Or have you already ticked all those boxes?
Think I've ticked off a lot of the boxes. My real love is brand and development. It's definitely the marketing side of it. As much as I'll always love design. I mean, that was my background, but I would much rather have a piece that I was telling the story behind than actually creating the piece. So it's not as much about the design of the article as it is the story and why somebody needs it, or how can we sell this as a company. So that's an area that I'll definitely continue to build my career in, is the branding and the marketing.
And that's something you're naturally so good at, because you're always hyping us all up and you're always, selling all of us. So I know that's your jam. I know that for sure.
Sometimes I sell things that I don't mean to. I'm like, oh, okay, I better do that now, because they got really excited about that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What would you say to people that want to start contributing in the fashion industry as a model or a designer, but they really don't know where to start?
Well, I guess if you're looking at modeling, because it's just so many, different avenues within the fashion industry. So if you're a model or you want to become a model or look into it, I definitely would, research in your local area the modeling agencies that are reputable. Possibly, obviously, see if they have go-tos or anything like that. Models do not need to go out and invest a ton of money in a portfolio before they meet with an agency. Those are things that you would work with an agent to be. Now, if you want to be a freelance model, or you really feel passionate about, then I would recommend, when there's things like auditions or open calls, just go and do your best and see what kind of feedback you can get. um, go on YouTube if you need to learn how to do a model walk, and it's all about posture and carrying yourself in confidence. I mean, that's the biggest thing there. But just the research on making sure that the agency is legitimate, that's a really important thing. I had a horrible story that was in the press a number of years ago of somebody who actually had said they were an agent for me and my agency, which had a very good reputation, and solicited an underage girl to send photos in their underwear. And they did it because they thought, oh, it was instead of, and actually, it was the girl and the mother. Instead of, what I would recommend, if you were ever approached like that, say, thank you, I'll call back the agency and make sure that this is legitimate. Because I'll tell you, no agency wants that. No agency is going to ask for that. So, those are the kind of things. So the legitimacy is very, very important. For designers, again, I guess it depends. Are they sort of a self-taught designer? Are they coming out of school? That's going to sort of depend on kind of your background, because if you don't have a background, I definitely recommend in trying to get some experience, job shadow, see if you can, sit in on some, work environments and try to see what you can do on that to get some experience. And, I don't like the word expert. People are like, oh, you're a fashion industry expert. That word, I feel very confining, because I think to be an expert, you have to be a student always.
Mhm.
I've done so many webinars since this shutdown that I probably have forgotten more than I've learned, but I never want to feel that I know everything.
Right.
And I think it's really, really important, especially starting out, that you constantly teach yourself. And, it's a very big gift for us as a civilization, that we have the ability to learn. There's a lot of countries that, people don't have as easy access to information as we do. And I think it's, on any self-appointed expert that they never stop learning, because especially in our industry, fashion is constantly changing, and you might have been an expert on something, 5 years ago, but now there's all this tech and you have to constantly learn, like, okay, now there's e-commerce, now there's all these things and all these platforms. And I think that just education is constant, no matter how long you've been in the industry.
Yeah, and that
So,
works across the board in any industry.
and yeah,
Educate yourself and show up, you know?
yeah,
Um,
show up. That's, yeah, yeah. You don't expect things to be handed to you, and I hate to say the word that nobody owes you anything.
But you're right.
You have to put the time in, and, you have to prove yourself. And, I feel every year, because of media, because of, different opinions, I constantly feel you still have to prove yourself. Sometimes, I mean, I don't care what people think. I was just like, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, you didn't enjoy this. All right, well, okay, I'll take that under advisement. But you have to have a little bit of a thick skin.
Right.
But at the same time, you also have to know that, you have to always be on, and not just, feel that, it is what it is, and, feel, complacent in what you're doing. So, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And this industry is so demanding. So how do you kind of handle when things get stressful? How do you, bring yourself back to the person you are without kind of losing your way?
Yeah, I usually probably an hour before the doors open up. Every Fashion Week night, I'm usually not approachable. I try to be. I apologize now to anybody I've ever snapped at in that hour before. That's usually my stress point.
Yeah.
Um, but I guess, I've always 10 seconds before you react to
Hmm.
things. I think now there's just been so many different scenarios that have happened over the years that it's probably I've always experienced it at once, at one time or another. There's very few times that I've ever have something new happen. So at least I feel like a little bit prepared. But you really do need to have a time throughout the day that you can have your own space.
Yeah.
I'm a I'm a believer in meditation, even if it's conscious meditation while you're driving. Turn off the radio. I mean, sometimes it's fun to listen to belt out your music, and that can be a relief for people. But even if you just turn off the radio and just drive to where you're going and just sort of clear your head space, I think that's necessary for everybody. Because you just have to have that sort of time. And people are like, oh, I don't have time to meditate. I don't have, like, well, you know what? If you've got 10 minutes to drive and go get yourself a coffee, you can meditate. So, you can just, and I'm not talking about necessarily having to get the mat and, sit in a space and do all that. There's other ways of doing it. It's a big deal to just have that time you can shut your brain off, so
Yeah,
that, everybody can just kind of reset.
it's true.
So,
We're constantly inundated with so much information. And so taking
yeah.
that time to not bring all this new stuff into your brain and let your brain settle is really great advice.
Yeah.
Do you have a time where you remember dealing with someone who was really arrogant or rude, and kind of how do you handle that type of personality where they're just trying to, make your day quick?
Oh, yes. I have had a few of those. Again, we're in an industry that, it's creative, and there's a lot of very big personalities. And I have learned through time and experience that it's not personal.
Right.
And that's where a lot of people have problems. And I did in the beginning. This person's upset about something, really is nothing to do with me. sort of maybe it's something I'm working on, but it's not me as a person. And I think once you can separate the taking things dramatically personal, like to you, you can have a level where they can lose their cool or, say things that are just wrong and sort of let it bounce back.
Yeah.
Be like, okay, all right, I'm going to go over here. Will you deal with, whatever you're dealing with there? Because, this really is nothing about me.
Right.
And unfortunately, I think that does takes experience to get there. There's a great visual technique if you're somebody who absorbs a lot of, people's emotions and feelings. Like you can kind of almost picture like a mirror around you, so that if you're in front of that, if you visually just see those things just like reflecting right off of you and not being absorbed, then, you can kind of just not internalize it, because that's really where it happens. When people behave that way, it's natural for people to just think, oh, it's me.
Mm-hmm.
They hate me, I'm doing something wrong. But for the most part, when that happens, I'm like, okay, you need to just go take your moment and calm down over there, and I'm just going to keep doing my thing. So,
That mirror analogy, and I find especially, and I know not all, but especially younger people when they're first starting in their careers, they really take everything personally. So to have that mirror analogy and to just realize it's not you, that's
yeah.
very powerful. Do you, I know we talked about this a little bit, but you know how we were saying, well, you were saying about the fashion always cycling back. Do you think that's going to be something forever in time, that we're always going to be cycling back the 80s, 90s, 60s?
A little bit. I mean, I don't think we'll ever get back to the corseted era, which I would hope not. But definitely, I think there's going to be something, only for the sheer fact that it's silhouettes.
Yeah,
So whatever the spin is on it, it's going to still have to follow in a silhouette that's probably been deemed into some time slot,
yeah,
whether it's that 60s pencil skirt. You're going to see that pencil skirt constantly throughout. Do you always call it 60s, or is it just that it's a pencil skirt? But I think it just gets to the point where, except for the couture pieces that are like, really over the top and just pieces of art, your everyday clothes are always going to have a little flair of something
right.
that's from another era, whether it's the wide-legged pants or the, high-waisted trousers, or the, bringing back the shoulder pads in the, suit jackets. There's just always going to be something of that.
Yeah,
Now, you see so much happening because of COVID, in a shift to work attire being more comfortable. Not only just because people are at home, even when people are going back to work now, they are so used to, 4 or 5 months working at home in comfortable clothing. They're not necessarily dressing up in the 4-inch heels. If, you like to wear a stiletto and, a fitted suit, they might try to bring in pieces that are a little bit more comfortable for, all day wear. So it's definitely, that's going to have an effect.
yeah, I like that. I'm all about comfy.
Oh, yeah.
Look
I know, I wore a pair of heels the other day and I'm like, no, these are not comfortable. That never happens to me.
funny.
So,
What is a piece of advice or a great tip that you could tell someone just starting out in the industry to absolutely avoid doing?
over promising.
Yes.
So, it's obviously good to have big goals, but don't take on more than you absolutely know you can do, because the first time you disappoint, the first time you let people down on an order, anything like that, it's going to uh, affect moving forward how people feel about your work. So I think don't take on too much. Just get really good at what you're doing. And even though everybody's, when you get orders, everybody wants to take all the work they can right away. You just really have to make sure that, you're not um, taking away from the quality of your work because you want the volume.
Right.
So, just it's the work ethic end of it, and really just not taking on too much.
Yeah, that's great advice. On the flip side of that, what is one thing you think they should start doing immediately?
reaching out, trying to get experience, whether it's just, volunteer. And that's the big thing. Everybody wants to, get in on the experience, but there's not a lot of people who can afford to hire people to give you the experience. So if you have the ability to maybe work 3 or 4 hours a week, just helping to, whether it's, helping to ship things and package it and, order taking or just anything like that, just to be able to get mentored and, how things work, whether you volunteer your time and, make sure that you are really asking like the right questions and get in there and really be present in the conversations and ask questions and, try to learn as much as you can.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so great. Um, I know you've done probably so many interviews over the years and things. Is there a question that you always wished someone would have asked you, but they never have, that maybe you'd want to talk about right now?
Cool. That question is a very good question. And I've never been asked that before, so you just did it. I don't know. I know because, I have a tendency to go off topic and talk about so much that often I will get, things out there that I think needs to be out there. Uh, to be honest, I just feel right now the big focus is really trying to get people to look at where their clothing is from and really, try to support what people are doing locally. And other than that, I mean, you just got to keep pushing through and trying to build the industry. But yeah, that was a good question. Nothing I could think of right off the top of my head.
Like, consider where your clothes are coming from.
Yeah.
That's actually that's a great thing to be mindful of, because especially now.
Yeah. No, it's true. We've proven that when you see even just shipping times and trying to get stuff that you're ordered and the things that, people got, like, who would have ever thought that, surgical masks wouldn't be available? I mean, it's just like things like that, right? It's amazing. So I think if we can build enough infrastructure and build the industry enough that we could sustain our workers to work within the industry and to be able to have, factories like Stanfield's that has hundreds of employees, to have more of those so that we can create not only the size of the industry, but to be able to create the ability for designers to have things locally made so that they can keep their costs down because we have such a booming industry. So I think there's just sort of that trickle down effect that is needed so that we can be self-sustaining on all levels.
That's right. And that whole ecosystem of keeping everybody employed and keeping those businesses alive. Yeah, that's extremely important, never more than now.
Yeah.
So okay, we're going to do a scenario time.
Okay.
You're allowed to keep all of your knowledge. Everything gets to stay in your brain, but you have no more resources and you're planted in a place where nobody knows you and no one has ever heard of you. What's the first thing you do to start to rebuild that fashion career?
I would hope that in somewhere in all of my travels, I have thought of a product or a niche market that, I am focused on. I would try to create just a couple of key pieces. And thanks to social media, and there is really nowhere in the world that you can't be, that
Right.
you can't run a business because of shipping and as long as I guess you're not in the middle of the desert. But if you have ability to be near anything like being able to ship and receive and those type of things, but create a very tight niche line. You don't have to be doing everything, whether it's a t-shirt business that you have some really cute slogans, but you do something, you start it and you build it on social media. And I would it doesn't matter where you live, you don't even have to let people know where you live.
That's
You
right.
just pick away. And I would hope that at this point in the career, I understand where to cost save and how to do things around not costing a fortune to start something.
Yeah. Smart. Stay small. Think
Stay
big.
small, stay small, think big. start out small and then, build. Because like I said, going back to overpromising, if you have too many things out there and you don't have the ability to create them in a timely fashion, if you get somebody's interest in something online, they see sold out. It's like, oh, when's the next time they're going to go back? So you want to be able to, I mean, sold out is good, but you have to be able to, replenish quickly and, or have something else that's similar. So I think that it's important that if you can do something small to start and, create a real buzz around it, then you can build on that, and then you can kind of see how your orders are coming in and, that type of thing. So
Yeah, that's awesome. So what's up next for Angela Campagnoni? What is up next, girl?
oh, I got a couple things coming up
Yes,
that I can't actually say yet. We've had this conversation once before, and I was hoping to be able to talk about it today, but unfortunately I'm not able to yet. So it's some pretty cool stuff, definitely in the brand and marketing area.
Nice.
And if people are following along with me on Instagram, obviously those will get announced along with some press releases and some stuff going on. But I'm excited. Sticking to my roots a bit.
Nice. I'm very excited to find out what's up next for you, Angela. And I want to thank you so much. Special thank you to Angela Campagnoni from AFW, Atlantic Fashion Week, and many other amazing things around Nova Scotia are here because of you, and we're so grateful. And I would also thank everyone who joined us today, and I hope they got as much value as I have listening to you and all of your great advice. And so thank you for tuning in to the East Coast Fashion Summit. And Ange, thank you so much. I can't wait.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for doing this. This is great.
Thank you. And thank you for always being so supportive. We appreciate it more than you'll ever know.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.